So what I'm going to do is, we've got Harry coming in later, who's going to talk about a particular piece of work that he's done relating to the Centre for Inclusive Growth in Nepal. So I'm just going to give a general overview of what's in the book. This is the big question, isn't it? When we analyse the interface between knowledge and policy, which tools should we use and where are they? There have been a lot of models developed over the years. Since the 1950s, people have been explicitly analysing the interface between knowledge and policy. And the point is that our workshop currently looks a little bit like this. It's very, very hard to see, if you go into a workshop that looks like this, what tools are you going to use for what purpose, where are they, and why are they in that state? And so the question is, will our toolkit ever look like this? And I think we've learned over the years that there is no single model of the interface between knowledge and policy. So how do we go about analysing it? And the point of this slide is to say, is not that this is not a representation of the relationships between knowledge and policy. They are never ever going to be that tidy. But the point is, how do we tidy up our toolkit? How do we understand and how do we develop a much clearer understanding of how to analyse the relationships between knowledge and policy? So the emphasis here is on a practical guide, developing a practical guide to this. And you all right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think what we should say is we very cleverly tried to make it impossible for you to decipher which chapter was written by whom, because we come from across ODI programs. We've also had contributions from the partners in EBPDN, which is the Evidence-Based Policy and Development Network. People who've contributed case studies, we've had civil society contributors, and it's very much been a collaborative effort. And we're all out in the field engaging with a range of actors on a variety of different projects and in different policy sectors. So it's drawn very much from our own experience as well as from the literature. So we really have tried to balance the theoretical with the practical and ultimately give insights into what you can actually do to analyse the interface between knowledge and policy. Carry on. Okay, carrying. Is that all right? I'll carry on talking, otherwise yes, Simon's going to cut me off at the knees. Anyway, the point is that it's what we're trying to make sure is that it's useful to everyone, irrespective of who you are, whether you're a researcher or a donor or somebody in a think tank or somebody in a civil society organisation. We hope that everybody's going to find it useful, irrespective of who you are and why you want to analyse the interface. So let's just go through those slides again. And this is the framework. We've said very clearly that there's no single model for analysing the interface between knowledge and policy. But there are 4 things that are important. It's very important to understand the political context. Who has the strongest voice in policy debates? What are the checks and balances in the system? How do the interests, values, beliefs and credibilities of the various actors in the policymaking process coincide or conflict with each other? What's the implication for the shape of the interface between knowledge and policy? Which types of knowledge are used in policy debates? Is one privileged over another? What's the effect of that? How do different types of knowledge flow through the policymaking process? And then who is performing this intermediary function? There are knowledge producers and there are knowledge users. Some people question whether there is a divide between knowledge and policy, but there are these intermediary organisations and people acting as individuals. I'll come back to that later. And the point of this framework is that you can use it to analyse at any level. So I'm currently doing some work on understanding the political economy of negotiations to harmonise efforts to monitor and evaluate climate finance. I've also done some work looking at where a small secretariat could be positioned so that it can fulfil a government-wide coordination role, and I used this model. But the point is that context is key. Each issue needs to be treated differently because the interaction of these 4 elements shapes the interface between knowledge and policy, and that's why you can't model it. So just to go quickly through what each of these are. And the bold is the headline message from each chapter. So the headline message about political context is you can't get away with saying, oh, it's all about political will, isn't it? And there's nothing we can do about it because it's just politics. It is about analysing who has the strongest voice in policy debates and why. And we do recognise that there are 3 types of state which give a broad sort of first cut at analysing. There are the more democratic political systems, more autocratic ones, and fragile states. But these are the 5 underlying characteristics which we think have more to say about the interactions between knowledge and policy than just the simple classification of whether it's democratic, autocratic, or fragile. And the book, in the chapter, we present a way of analysing each of these issues in a systematically. And the second chapter is about how do we engage actors. And again, the headline is, don't assume that just because somebody's a white male, he's going to act in the interest of all white males. That's absolutely not the case, that people's values and belief systems sometimes lead them to act counter to their own self-interests. And Harry's going to talk a little bit more about this, but a couple of headline points. For example, work that Nicola did looked at post-authoritarian Korea, where rather than adapting, where they were trying to improve the gender balance of policies, and rather than adapting Western framing of feminist ideas, which tend to focus on the values of individual rights and freedoms, researchers promoted culturally resonant messages which emphasized the collective, and this is very much in line with Confucian ethics and values. So demands for equal employment rights were couched as maximizing women's human resources for national development and strengthening Korean industry. So understanding values and belief systems can help you to understand how to frame policies in a way that possibly helps to overcome some of the self-interest that may be shaping the interface between knowledge and policy. The next chapter is about the different types of knowledge. And again, there's a lot of contested understandings about what knowledge is and what knowledge isn't. And what we're saying here is that focus on knowledge for policy. And the point is that knowledge set in a policy context is about what it means in the context of what you're trying to achieve. So the important issues are that there are 3 main types of knowledge for policy. There's research-based knowledge, and that helps to clarify the associations between issues. So it can name and describe and analyse and disentangle complex relationships, and it can test ideas for relevance. Its value basis, if you like, its normative content, is often implicit, which means that research-based knowledge tends to be used instrumentally to achieve a particular goal. Practice-based, but then that's such as climate science. Practice-informed knowledge or practice-based knowledge is very much about what works. It's about taking the results of from evaluations and from experience and from practice. And that helps to make comparisons between the intended and the actual. So describing and situating policy actions within this understanding of what's the difference between what was intended and what's actually happening. And it tests, practice-based knowledge tests ideas for feasibility. Its value basis does depend on the organization's mandate, which means that it can be either explicit or implicit. You can use practice-based knowledge instrumentally, or you can incorporate it into the sort of being of the organization. And then the final one is citizen knowledge, such as participatory governance assessments that Nicola's currently working on. Rather than saying, this is what peace means, what can it do for you, is going out to understand what peace means for the citizens of Nepal. Yes, sorry, wasn't aware of that one. And this describes opinions and values, and it tests ideas for acceptability and coherence with local and individual understandings. And the values of citizen knowledge are quite explicit. Many people see this as the main purpose of integrating citizen knowledge with policy. The point about knowledge intermediaries is we're all knowledge intermediaries, regardless of whether we sit, where we sit, which organization we sit in, whether we consider ourselves to be a producer or a user. Any act at the interface between knowledge and policy is an intermediary act, and it's also a political one. And what's quite interesting is that the process of writing this book led us to engage in a lot of online debates. The word intermediaries is quite contested at the moment, but until somebody comes up with a better one, we're going to stick with that. And these are the 6 intermediary functions that we propose in the book, building on work done by Sarah Michaels, which starts with informing, which is just a simple dissemination of knowledge from producer to user, such as a lot of research communication activities. The second one is linking, which links producer to user within a discipline or an issue, such as the work that Grupo Faro in Ecuador is doing, where they're linking indigenous knowledge, indigenous environmental knowledge, to policymaking in the Ministry of Environment. The third one is matchmaking, which is expanding this linking function to bring in knowledge from across different domains. So, for example, matchmaking research scientists, disciplinary scientists, with local communities via intermediaries is being done by Practical Action in Bangladesh. They don't just find the information for farmers, they also find out what the questions are. And so the matchmaking is much broader. It's about you wouldn't have spoken to this person if the knowledge intermediary hadn't done a bit of matchmaking. The next one is engaging, where the process deepens to frame the issues more inclusively. There's more active engagement, such as with a cash transfers project, going to communities in a post-conflict context and asking them what questions they want to ask even before doing the literature review. So engaging with the communities to understand what is needed. At a more again, this is all about lengthening and deepening the process of engagement between those who hold the knowledge and those who need the knowledge. So collaborating just formalises that process a little bit more. So another example from Practical Action is some community agricultural hubs, which are staffed by volunteer extension agents to address farmers' questions. And then the final one is building adaptive capacity, which is building sustainable institutions to promote learning from doing, to promote self-financing, to promote local institutions' own ability to engage on a long-term basis with the policy debate, such as Prolanova, the NGO Prolanova is doing in various countries, including all over West Africa. And the important point is that these are not 6 intermediaries. These are not different types of intermediaries. These are types of function. And what we say in the book is it's very important to get away from the idea that I'm a knowledge intermediary and you're not. We're all knowledge intermediaries. We're just performing different functions at the interface between knowledge and policy. And we need to understand those within the wider construct of building adaptive capacity and social learning.
Another minute?
Yep. So these are the messages for what it means to do your homework well. If you're going to analyse the interface between knowledge and policy, do your homework well. And this is the summary of all the chapters. We'll have the slides for you later on, but I'm being hurried by Simon. So the point is, it's not really this tidy, but it's not about doing more political economy analyses. It's about looking at the interactions between political context and values, interests, belief and credibility of the actor, and the types of knowledge and the knowledge interaction processes they favour, and understanding what this combination delivers, or quite often fails to deliver, to the policy-making process. So some core messages for knowledge producers about understanding political context. Don't make any assumptions that about the political context. Realise that all action at the interface between knowledge and policy is a political action. So for knowledge users as well as for knowledge producers, you are engaging in a political process. Knowledge intermediaries, think about the function. Form follows function. So think about what functions are needed and then decide the form that any knowledge intermediary activities need to take. And for donors, I think there are 2 insights. The first is that do your homework a bit better. And fund people to do their homework a little bit better. And the second one is that understanding how to help policymakers and citizens articulate their demands for knowledge in policy is, we think, the next frontier. There's been a lot of work on the supply side on improving the supply. There's been very little on understanding what the demand is, and we hope that our book makes a contribution to beginning that. Thank you.